connect and things. So what I'll quickly do is just load up YouTube to see if it started going live or not. Let's just have a look. Yeah, the little bot normally picks it up, but just to be on the safe side. Oops. Oh, there we go. It seems to have gone. Oh, seems to have gone live on YouTube. So we are up on YouTube. So that's good. So hopefully now it should then connect to Twitch and all the rest of it. But the main one is YouTube, so that's what we need. Lovely. Okay. So just give it a second to... There we are. Okay. So for everybody who is already here, welcome to the next installment of Code Club, or TechnoClub. Hope everybody's had a good week. Just going to give everybody a chance to join in before we make a official start on things. So hopefully this should be live on YouTube now. If for whatever reason you can't hear my voice, or if there's any audio issues, or if there's any problems, let me know and I will start streaming through Discord instead. But fingers crossed, you should be able to hear me and see my screen now. But like I said, let me know if there are any problems. But what we'll do, we'll give everybody, like as usual, a few minutes to join in, and then we'll make a start in a little while. So let's have a look. Okay, so it seems to be all up on YouTube now, which is good. And hopefully it starts on Twitch and everything else, but YouTube seems to be fine. What I will do is I will share my screen in... oh, there we go. So it seems to have pinged up on Twitch now as well. What I'll do, I'll share my screen on Discord as well, just in case, so that you can all see that. Stand by, screens, Minecraft education. Okay, there we go. So hopefully you should be able to all see my screen as well now on Minecraft, as on Discord as well. So we'll give everybody a little bit of time. Like I said, we'll make a start about 5 past. Okay. Okay, lovely. So, hopefully everybody's had a chance to settle in now and get all ready for today's stream. So, if you haven't already, open up Minecraft Education. Hopefully, you should all be able to get set up on that as usual. And as I mentioned earlier on today, what we're going to be doing today is going through an introduction to JavaScript. So I know that some people requested last week during the when we asked sort of about what we were going to do with the coding club going forward, a lot of you asked for, or some of you asked for JavaScript. So what I thought we'd do today, as a little bit of an introduction to JavaScript, is we would do that, but through Minecraft, which is of course something that we're all familiar with already, something that we're already used to. So I thought it'd be a good idea to introduce ourselves and familiarize ourselves again with Minecraft. I know a lot of you are of course very familiar with it already, but we'll go back into Minecraft and we'll start going through the process of looking at JavaScript by programming the agent. Okay, so I thought that would be a nice way for us to kind of get used to get a bit of an intro to how JavaScript works. I'd like to just introduce who I've got with me on the stream today. So with me today is Andy.
Hi,
So Andy works with us, or works with me in the Bangor Hub Technocamps. So if you have any questions today, Andy's going to be monitoring the Discord, as will I. And then if you do have any questions, just pop them in the chat or come onto the voice channel and we'll be able to help you out as best we can with any questions. So, and thank you, Andy, for helping out today.
not a problem.
Okay. So what we're going to do now is the usual bits and pieces to start off with. So I'm going to start up just a blank world. If you've got a world that you would like to use that you've already created, I know that we started building up some worlds before Summer of STEM and things like that. So feel free to use really any world that you like, but preferably one that's got sufficient space that you can use to in order to program the agent to kind of move around quite a bit. Okay, so I'm going to start up a new world. So I'll go through that process again just to remind those of you who are not familiar with Minecraft what to do. So I'm going to go to play, followed by create new, and then I'm just going to use a blank new world. So click on new. I'm going to give my world a name, so I'm going to call it JavaScript world. I'm going to set my default game mode to being creative. Keep the difficulty on peaceful, leave the permission level as member, and then I'm going to select a flat world just because that maximizes the space that I've got. So we'll go with a flat world. I'm going to ensure that show coordinates is enabled because that can be quite useful. And I'm going to also keep the code builder switched on because we're going to definitely need that today. And then if you like, you can enable always day as well if that helps to keep things kind of going. And then if there are any classroom settings that you want to adjust, such as having perfect weather on or anything like that, then feel free to do so. Okay, but all I would like you to have and ensure that you have enabled today are the cheats, the code builder, and the coordinates. Okay, so those are the only things that you will definitely need today to make sure that we get this all working. So coordinates, cheats, and code builder, and then any other settings that you'd like to adjust, you can do so. You feel free to do so. So after I've done that, I'm going to hit play, and then of course Minecraft is going to load up and launch into a completely blank world. So to remind those of you who again maybe aren't so familiar with Minecraft, I'll just go through some of the different controls that we can use today. So in order to move around in Minecraft, we use W, A, S, and D on the keyboard. We use space to jump, and if you tap spacebar twice, you can start flying. So if I tap spacebar twice, you can see now that I'm also flying. If you want to access your inventory, you can do so by pressing the E key, so that will launch your inventory. We are going to, of course, be using the code builder as well, so that's done by pressing C on the keyboard, and that will launch us into our code builder. which can be quite slow sometimes. So sort of hoping this works for me today. Seems to be taking a very long time, so hopefully it will kick in eventually. As you can see, the agent has appeared. Okay, the code builder is taking a very long time to try and load today, which is not particularly helpful. Okay, we'll come back to that. And then if you want to sneak, you can do that with Shift, okay, on the keyboard. So I'm just going to exit out the world and go back into it in the hope that that allows my code builder to actually load. I'm not quite sure what's wrong with that today. Come on. I can see it attempting to load. I'll just leave it on the screen for a second in the hopes that it kicks in. So, as I mentioned, what we'll be doing today is programming using JavaScript. And what I have are a series of smaller tasks that we'll work through. Okay, so it's a series of smaller tasks that we'll work through. And then after we've been through those smaller tasks, we'll then go on to going through the a slightly larger task, which isn't that many lines of code. However, will hopefully help you to kind of understand JavaScript a little bit more, because it's a bit of an extended bit of code in a way, which will kind of help you to kind of understand the idea of using brackets and all that sort of thing. So my code builder is definitely not wanting to work today. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to just close down Minecraft and relaunch it. So if the screen does go black temporarily, that is absolutely okay. So I'm just going to close down that and relaunch Minecraft in the hopes that that fixes the problem. Let's hope it does. There we go. Okay, so sorry about that. So small technical problem there with the code builder. Not quite sure what was going on there. But the code builder should now be up and running. So I'll give everybody just a chance to catch up with that and get up to speed, and then we shall carry on in a minute or two. So like I said, get a world built up, get sort of created, as it were, get the code builder launched as well. There we are. So hopefully you should all be able to see the code builder on my screen now. Apologies for that small technical issue. There we go. Like I said, if you have any questions or if there's anything that you're unsure about, let me know. I know that JavaScript is going to be new to a lot of you. Okay, so if at any point you feel like I'm going too quickly through the code, or if I'm going, you know, too slowly even through the code, then let me know. And I'll adjust the speed in which I am delivering it to accordingly, okay? But I want to make sure that everybody understands, everybody's what we're talking about, everybody's on the same page, just so that way we can work through it together, because learning a new language is really fun, but it also, of course, comes with a lot of different things, a lot of different new things to learn. So we'll take our time, we'll work through it together, and then if anybody has any questions at all, remember, join the voice channel or pop it in the Discord, and Andy and I will help you best we can. Okay, so I'm going to start up a new project. So I shall call this one, we'll say JavaScript Project 1. Okay. So I'm going to create that now. And Again, the code builder is being incredibly slow, but I'm going to switch over to JavaScript, and we're going to start looking at one of the tutorials which Minecraft Education have actually created, but instead of us just working through that tutorial, we'll work through it together in order to, so that we can go through it step by step to make sure that we all understand it, so to speak. The code builder is not a fan of being used whilst live streaming, it would seem, because it's taking a very, very long time, but hopefully it should kick in at some stage. Hopefully you've all managed to get your code builders up and running. If the code builder doesn't work on my screen, what I'll do is I will write the code out using Notepad, and I'll stream that to you, and then all you'll have to do then is simply is just add it to your code builder on your screens, okay? Because it'll look exactly the same, because it's a text-based language. So what happens if I was to write it out in Notepad, it would look exactly the same on your screens in the actual code builder. So I'll try and get this working, but if not, I'll just use Notepad. It's fine. Let's see if we can get this fixed up. Let's have a look here. Okay, I think so. I've managed to get it to block-based. Let's see if I can actually get it to switch over to JavaScript now. Hopefully we can. It's taking a very, very long time. So remember, when you are creating your new project, make sure that you call it something meaningful so that you can remember what it is. Obviously, we've discussed before the need to call our variables, our functions, and even our programs things that we can remember what they're actually called. So that way we don't have to worry, about thinking back afterwards. Oh, what did I mean by, what did I mean by that type thing? Okay, we'll know exactly what it's called. We know what that program does. And it helps us to save having to think, by just reading the code itself, that's what this does. We'll know from the title of the program exactly what it's for. So my code builder really does not want to work today. Let's try it one more time. Let me try a new project, but this time I'll just give it a JavaScript only, and hopefully that should launch me straight into the new... There we go. Okay, right. We're up and running. So again, sorry about that technical problem. So hopefully everybody is now up to speed, and we're all in the same place. I will zoom in a little bit on the code so that you can see what it looks like a bit clearer. If it's too small, just let me know and I'll zoom in some more. So the first thing that we're going to do today is we're actually going to, like I said, follow one of the tutorials that Minecraft Education have produced, which was probably, I believe, the first one that we did when we started looking at Minecraft's code builder, which is the Chicken Rain tutorial. But instead of course, doing it in block-based programming, we're going to do it in JavaScript. Now, if you have managed to get your code builder to load by having it set to having the option of running, switching between block-based Python and JavaScript, which would be along the tops of your screens, you'll be able to see the similarities between each language by flicking back between each type, but for some reason that's not working on my code builder today. So as an alternative, what I'll do is I will just have the language in programmed in JavaScript, but you can flick back and forth between languages so that you can see the similarities if you want to. If at any stage you are stuck, the menus on the left of the screen actually help you with the code that we're going to need. So for an example, if I click on the agent menu, you can see that the code that we need, so let's say we wanted to get the agent to teleport to the player. If I click on that, you can see that the code that I need in order to allow that to happen is actually written along the is written in the big box. Okay, so you'll see that agent teleport to player in JavaScript is written as agent.teleport to player open and close bracket. Okay, so that these will act as a little bit of help for you should you get stuck when you're programming your own thing later on. But for now, we'll work through some tutorials together, and then I'll set you a bit of a challenge later on to work through something yourselves. So first thing we're going to do, like I said, is the chicken rain tutorial. And you might remember that one of the things that we did in the chicken rain tutorial was we used a repeat block, I believe. Okay, so what we were saying was that we wanted the lots and lots of chickens to rain down upon us from the sky, and to do that we used a repeat block where we said repeats so many times, and then we would say repeat, say 100 times, and then the chickens would start raining. When we're using Python or JavaScript, the repeat block is represented by something known as a for loop. Okay, so a for loop, you can specify exactly how many times you would like the piece of code to run essentially before it moves on to the next bit of code. So the for loop, in this case, we're going to say that we want the code to repeat 100 times so that we have 100 chickens raining upon us. Okay, so for loop is represented by the keyword for, and again, like we saw with Python last week, when we type in a keyword, okay, so when we type in a keyword to that's related to the programming language in some way, that is then represented by saying it will highlight that word in a particular color. So you can see here that when I typed in for, that word then changed into being blue. Okay, and then we're going to say open bracket, and you can see that a useful thing about using the code builder and things like that is that it will automatically open and close the brackets for you, just in case you forget, because brackets in these languages are very, very important. So we saw with Python last week that there weren't really that many brackets used, and I was of course telling you how Python is very particular about the way that code is indented and how you have to have so many gaps. So if something is part of an if statement or a for loop, you have to indent it. So you might remember that we did that, we pressed tab on our keyboard and it shifted our the where we could type to being with inside of the of that, say, if statement or for loop, for an example. Okay, so we need to do something similar today with JavaScript, but we also have to be very careful about where we put our brackets. So it's if you do get stuck at any point, have a check of your brackets, make sure they match up with the brackets that I have on my screen, and hopefully that will help. But if you're still stuck, then of course we'll help you out as best we can. So we're going to say for, and then we're going to use another keyword let, and then we're going to say I equals 0, okay? And I'm going to put a semicolon at the end of that. Now, you might be wondering what the I equals 0 means, and the I equals 0 is, this is us effectively initializing a variable which is going to act as kind of like a counter, okay? So what it's going to do is, this variable is going to increase, and once it reaches a certain point, that's then going to say, right, that the loop needs to stop now, because our variable has reached a point in which we are telling it to stop. So like with the repeat loop, when we're saying, okay, repeat 10 times, this is the same. This is how we get the for loop to know when to stop. So we want 100 chickens. So in order to tell the for loop to stop after 100 chickens, we're going to be saying I less than 100. Okay, so what this is essentially saying now is we're saying we've got a variable. Of course, a variable is like a storage container for a piece of data. We've got that, and we've said that that variable to start off with is going to hold the value of 0. Okay, whilst it's holding the value of 0, every time the loop runs, we need to check to make sure that I is still holding a value of less than 100. And that's then signifying that we want the loop to only run 100 times. And the less than symbol, which is of course that little lefty arrow, okay, is saying that we're checking with every iteration of the loop that the value of I is still less than 100. And in order to get our value of I to increment or to go up with every single loop, we're going to say I++. Now I++ looks a bit weird, but what the purpose of it is it's essentially saying every time the loops run, we would like the value of our variable, which is called I, to increment by 1. Okay? So we're saying that every time our loop runs, our variable I is going to go up by 1 every time until it reaches a value of 100. And once it reaches 100, okay, it's then going to stop. Now, I++, you don't necessarily have to worry about this now, but just as a little bit of extra information, I++, okay, what that means is that every time the loop is run, we want the variable I to be increased by 1, okay? But if we were to say ++I, what that would essentially say is the variable I would be increased before the loop is run. Okay, so you can say I++, but what for the purposes of a for loop, it's more programmatically correct in this case to have I++, so that the loop runs once and then the value of I gets increased afterwards. And of course, make sure that all of that is encased inside of those brackets. Okay, now we're going to be using two types of bracket today. So we're going to be using rounded brackets, which is what everything that's encased inside for the for loop is within. But we're also going to be using a curly bracket, which is what this bracket is here. And you can see that JavaScript has automatically given me a closing curly bracket as well. Now, if you place your sort of cursor in between the two brackets and then hit enter, what we're now doing is we're including everything that's going to happen during the for loop inside of those curly brackets. And you can see that it's indented the code for me as well. So you can see how we are now shifted one tab space inside of the curly brackets. Okay, so hopefully you're all with me so far. If you do have any questions, remember, post them in the Discord or come into the voice channel and we'll help you out. So what we need to now tell our program is what we would like to happen during the for loop. So I'm going to say, and again, this is because we're using the Minecraft code builder, it will auto suggest certain things that you might need to use. So I'm going to say mobs.spawn. Okay, so we're going to spawn in one of our mobs. The one that I'm going to choose is the chicken. And then what I need to say is what relative coordinates I would like the chicken to spawn in at. Now we know in Minecraft that we have two different types of coordinates, don't we? We've got the world coordinates and we have the relative coordinates. Now the world coordinates are of course where in your world you would like the object to spawn. And the relative coordinates are those that are in relation to your player. So how far, sort of where next to your player you would like the objects to spawn. Now we're going to be using relative coordinates today. So that's represented by saying pos, open bracket, and then we're going to type the coordinates in those brackets by separating them by commas. So you remember that it's x, y, z. Okay, x coordinates, y coordinates, and z coordinates. So I want our chickens to spawn 10 blocks above my playable character. So I'm going to say 0, 10, 0. Okay, and those are the position is encased inside of its own set of rounded brackets. Okay, so we've got chicken, pos, comma, chicken, comma, pos, 0, 10, 0. And that's all going to be encased inside of its own set of rounded brackets as well. Okay, and then of course the curly bracket comes afterwards to say that is the end of the content within the for loop. So we'll run through that again to make sure that everybody understands what's going on. We're using a for loop, and we are setting up a variable called I, and that variable is going to hold the value of 0. Every time the loop runs, the value of our variable I is going to be increased by 1, and we're going to be checking that that variable is below 100, it's less than 100, every single time the loop runs. When the loop runs, a chicken will be spawned 10 blocks above where we're standing, and then we are ending the for loop's content then with another curly bracket. So everything inside of the curly brackets is what belongs to the for loop. And this is the condition of the for loop. Okay. Now you'll notice that we haven't actually used a when command is when command is run and given the command a name. So when we hit this green plus play button, it will automatically run the code, hopefully. So if I hit play, again, I don't know if my code builder is working as predicted. However, as you can see, it hasn't actually worked, but that is indeed the correct code. I'm not quite sure what's wrong with my code builder today. However, the chickens are meant to, of course, start raining above us. However, for some reason, it's not working. But that is the correct code. Okay, so I will try and again restart my world in the hopes that that fixes the problem. However, that is the correct code. Again, I'm not sure what's wrong with my code builder today. It's, of course, being very temperamental. But that is the correct code for the chicken rain. Okay, so hopefully... Oh, there we go. It's kicked in. There we go. So you can see there's the chickens. And there's all the 100 chickens. Okay. So you're probably... a lot of you might wonder why we have it set to being I is equal to... when I is less than 100. And the reason that we've got it set to I is less than 100 is because the first iteration of the loop, okay, so the first time the loop is run, it's going to run it with I being 0. So that 0 is like number 1, and the 99th iteration of the loop will be the 100th. Sorry, when I is equal to 99, that will be the 100th iteration of the loop. So if you wanted the loop to run 100 times, another way that you could do it is you could say I is equal to 1, and then when I is less than or equal to 100. So that way the loop would keep running 100 times, because you are starting I off as being 1, and then you are saying that the loop can keep running until I is less than or equal to 100, and anything over 100 it would then stop. But it looks a bit neater if you set I to 0 from the start, and then you say that the loop can keep running until I is less than 100. So hopefully you've all kept up with that so far. I've not seen any questions come up in the Discord, so I assume that everybody who's currently watching is keeping up okay with that so far. So what we'll do in a second is we'll move on to looking at the next bit of code, which is a little bit longer. Okay, so we're going from 3 lines up to 11 lines. This time, so a little bit more, but hopefully that should be okay. Oh, good. I'm glad you can see that Alex is all good. Thank you, Alex. So we'll move on now in just a second to the next part. So the next one that I've got is another. It's another tutorial that Minecraft have produced. But this time we're going to be doing a couple more lines, and we're going to be actually building something, but not with the agent. Okay, we're just going to be writing a couple of lines of code, but it gives you a bit of a sense of the use of brackets. Okay, so again, I'm really sorry about all of the technical issues that are occurring with the code builder at the moment. Hopefully they will fix themselves and iron themselves out. So I'm going to go back to the home page, and I'm going to start another new project. So I'm going to call it JavaScript 2, create, and flick over to JavaScript. So now I'm going to delete all of the code that comes with it. I can now actually flick back and forth between the two, so we'll be able to see the differences a bit better now. Hopefully it stays with me and actually works this time. So what we're going to do now, like I said, is we're going to go through a little bit of a longer bit of code. So there's a little bit more to this. So again, if I'm going too fast, just stop me and let me know. But it's not a huge step up, but we'll go through it. So the demo that I've chosen from Minecraft for this next bit of code is the building an aquarium demo, which Minecraft have done. And what they did during that demo is they said that when your playable character swung a trident, okay, it built this aquarium out of thin air, which I thought was quite cool. So we're going to write a script now, which covers how essentially we would do that, and it's not that much code, so hopefully you should be fine. Now, of course, the first thing that we need to do is tell Minecraft that when we swing a trident, we want it to do something. So to do that, we can use the player dot on item interacted line. Okay, so it's going to, I'm going to zoom out just a little bit for this one. It's going to bring up a whole bunch of stuff which you can keep there if you want to. Okay, you can see mine is defaulted to saying iron shovel. I'm going to change that to being trident. Okay, so I'm saying that when the player has some sort of interaction with trident, we're going to run a function. Now, a lot of you might remember that a function is a bit of code that we use to that we can reuse over and over and over again in a program, and it's a similar principle again in JavaScript in terms of we have specifying that we are I don't know, how could I put it, we're specifying that we're writing a few lines of code that we need to do something specifically. So we're saying that when the player has a trident, we're running this specific function. Now, there is an empty set of opening and closing rounded brackets that come at the end, okay? And you can also see that we've also got these curly brackets. And it's everything that's within those curly brackets that's going to be considered our function in a way, okay? So what I'm writing now is how we would build up our aquarium, but if you want to get creative and do your own thing, that's absolutely fine, Okay, I do, and this is just an example of one thing that you can do, but but I'm going to go through how we're going to build the aquarium. So I've gone down to line 2. Again, my code is indented, so we are one tab space into the function. So that means that everything that's part of this, these next few lines of code are all part of the function. And first thing that we're going to do is we're going to say blocks dot fill. Okay, whoops. So we're going to say blocks dot fill, and what we need to do is we need to bring up fill up an area with glass and water that's essentially going to house all of our fish and underwater plants. So first one I'm going to have is I'm going to build up a glass structure. So I want to build up some glass, and I'm going to position it in a particular place in my world. So again, we're using pos, which is relative coordinates to the player. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to say pos, open bracket, and again it automatically gives me that closing bracket so I don't forget to not include it. And I'm just going to choose, I'm going to choose this location. I'm going to say 5, 0, and -10, so that specific place is where the glass is going to go. I'm then going to pop a comma at the end, and I'm going to say that it needs to fill, because we need to actually get our aquarium to fill a specific place. All that would do now, that line, is it would just put one row of glass. It wouldn't be a complete sort of cube of glass. So what we need to do is we need to say that it's going to go to pos, up to pos 12, 7, 10. And that's essentially now going to fill up an area with glass. And what we also need to then do is fill up that glass using some water, but with water. So we're going to say again blocks.fill, and you can see that it's given. If you click on blocks.fill when it suggests it, it will write out all of the code for you. So we're going to fill with water, and the position in which we're going to do is, of course, inside of the glass aquarium that we've just built up. So this is the way that I would structure it. So what we're doing now is we're saying that everything is kind of within that glass structure that we've just produced. Okay, so we are saying that we want a glass structure built across a specific area, and we want to fill that glass structure with water to act as our aquarium. Okay, so what we've got there is our structure built. So if you were to swing your trident now, what you would get inside of that glass structure is a glass, or what you would get is a glass structure filled with water. But we of course want to fill our structure with fish and different sort of underwater plants and things like that. So we can of course use looping for that. Okay, so again, like we used last time, we can use a for loop, and we can use that for loop to repeat bits of code so that we end up having, say, 4 of maybe each fish, or 4 of each plant, or something like that. Okay, so I'm going to use a for loop, making sure that we're still indented 1 tab space. Okay, so making sure that we're still indented 1 tab space, because this is all still part of the same function, remember. We're going to say for, and once again we're going to use our variable I. Okay, so we're going to say let I is equal to 0, semicolon, and I'm going to say that I want 5 of each fish and plant that I'm spawning in. Now, you're welcome, if you want to have multiple for loops that, say you wanted, I don't know, let's just say you wanted 5 dolphins, but you only wanted 2 pufferfish. You could have several for loops that allow you to have that run at different times, so that way you can alter the amount of each item that you have. But to keep it simple for this tutorial, I'm going to just have 4 of everything. So I'm going to say whilst I is equals to 0 and I is less than 4, and again I plus plus, I'm going to bring in another curly bracket. Okay, so keeping track of your curly brackets is important here, because you need to remember exactly what curly bracket is linked to what part of the code. If you highlight a curly bracket, you can in a way you can try and keep track of where that curly bracket finishes. So this opening curly bracket here doesn't have a closing bracket until down here, whereas this curly bracket, which is tied to this for loop, finishes here. So now everything that's within this set of curly brackets is part of the for loop, whereas everything that's between these 2 curly brackets is part of the whole function. Okay, I know that sounds quite confusing, but it's important that you keep track of what curly brackets go where, so that way you know what's part of what bit of code. And what you'll notice now as well is once we've opened up those curly brackets, we've now indented twice. So now we are writing out code that's part of the for loop, but that's still part of our overall function. So I'm going to spawn in a couple of things. So I'm going to start off by spawning in some pufferfish. So we can use that mobs.spawn. Okay. And I want them to spawn within 2 different places. So I'm not going to spawn a chicken into the water, but I'm going to spawn in a pufferfish. And I'm going to use a different type of position this time. I'm going to say rand pos. Now rand pos, as I'm sure you can all guess, means that we're going to be spawning our pufferfish in a random position. Okay, but we're going to say rand pos, but we need to specify between what 2 positions we want that rand pos command to actually place our pufferfish. So we're going to say rand pos, okay, open bracket, pos, and then we're going to say, right, we want our pufferfish, we want it to spawn in within the water, which we defined earlier. So of course the coordinates for the water were 6, 1, and -9. So we can see that from before. Okay, so from up here, we when we defined our water, where our water was going, we said 6, 1, -9 to 11, 6, 9. And that's what we're going to say down here. We're going to say we want it spawning in between the position 6, 1, -9 and position, let me zoom out a bit, and position 11, 6, and 9. So now we are completely, you can see now that we have said that our pufferfish is going to spawn in a random position between those 2 sets of coordinates. Okay. Now, you need to make sure that you have open and close brackets that sort of close everything. So you can see here that let's have a look. So if we're talking about the opening bracket after mobs.spawn, that is closed by this bracket at the end here. Okay. The opening bracket for the position is closed by this bracket here, and the 2 random position brackets are all closed up after each 3 sets of coordinates. So you need to make sure that everything that has an opening bracket also has a closing bracket. Okay. So once you've done that, you can then spawn in the rest of the things that you want to add. So that's one line. So what you can do, if you wish, is you can actually copy and paste this bit of code to save you writing it out again. So you can copy and paste, but just change the item that you want to spawn in. So I might want, say, a salmon. And maybe I will do it again, so copy and paste, but this time I might go for some cod. Okay, so again, they're still spawning within the water, they're still all part of the for loop, and I might put some sea creatures in there as well. Sorry, some underwater plants. So for an example, I might put some is there coral? I think there's coral, isn't there? There's you could have bubble coral. So bubble coral fan. Okay. I might also have some kelp in there. So we'll change that to being kelp. Okay. So there's nothing wrong with copying and pasting code if you are going to be reusing that same bit of code over and over in a program. Okay, if it saves you having to write out the code over and over again, just copy and paste it. Okay, so you can copy and paste the code and then that'll be fine. Now remember, once you've completed your for loop, okay, and you've added in all of the different spawns that you want to be included within the for loop, make sure that the for loop is then closed off with a close curly bracket, and then down on this line you should then have a close curly bracket to signify the end of the function, and as well as a rounded bracket. So you're essentially saying that all of this is part of one function. Okay, and that's finished off with a curly bracket to say that everything that's part of the function has completed, and everything that's part of the interaction with the trident is closed then off with that round bracket at the end. Okay, I will leave that code up on the screen just for a minute or two for people to write everything out. I know it's quite confusing. There's a lot of brackets, there's a lot of different bits of indentation, there's lots of lines. Bear in mind that we are here to help if you need it. Okay, so I'll leave that up on the screen just for a minute or two for people to get caught up, and then I'll flick back over then to actually to running that bit of code then. I hope that everybody's finding it okay so far. Lots and lots of brackets with JavaScript. So JavaScript has got a lot of brackets, which is of course very different to what we saw before with Python. Okay, Python of course has brackets, but not as many. Okay, Python likes indentation more than brackets. But brackets are of course a very important part of the code builder when it comes to JavaScript. What I'll quickly do is just flick back over to, before I run this code, in fact no, we'll run the code first and then I'll show it to you in block-based programming so we can have a look at the similarities. So I'm going to run it, hopefully it works. Of course it didn't work because my code builder is not cooperating. Rest assured this is the correct code, okay? It is the correct code. It definitely didn't run, so I'll save and exit again and reload the world in the hopes that that fixes it. Let's have a look. Try that again. Okay, so this particular bit of code doesn't want to work today. I'm not quite sure why, but that is the correct code, okay? Oh, of course it's not running because I haven't swung a trident. So let's do that. So I'll pop into the inventory and I'll just grab a trident out of the inventory. Put that into my equipment. Oops. And if I swing this trident, there it is. There we go. So you can see that I now have a full aquarium. You can see if I scroll down that I've got I'm counting 4 pufferfish. Yeah. Sorry. I've got 4 pufferfish, and I've also got salmon and cod. Okay, so it's run that 4 times, and it's all within the aquarium. Okay. Sorry, that was my mistake. I did forget to swing the trident. But there you go. So you can see that all of the fish are in there. Okay, and it's built up the aquarium. So if I just head back to the code builder and I go back to the block-based code, you can see that it is very, very similar, okay, in terms of the phrasing and in terms of the way that we've put it together. So we've got when item trident is used, we're filling up this space with glass blocks, and we're filling up this space with water blocks, and then we are 4 times we are spawning in cod, pufferfish, and salmon in those at a random point, but at those coordinates, and we're also spawning in. I'm not quite sure why the plants didn't spawn in, but either way, the fish are there, and we're repeating that 4 times, and that's of course represented with a for loop. Okay, if we have a quick look at Python, you can see that we've got the keyword dev along the top of the screen there, which of course means function. And when the trident is swung, we are filling, again, look, it's very, very similar to the JavaScript. Okay, we're filling that area with glass, that area with water, and then we're spawning in 4 of each one of those items in those positions. Okay, so again, really similar, just slightly different, and you can see that there's a lot less brackets in Python. Okay, you can see that JavaScript, okay, it's formatted the code now. That's why it looks a bit different. It's formatted the code to be slightly, I'm not quite sure why it's formatted the code to look like that, but it's formatted the code, but it's still the same code. And you can see that it is similar, just it's also in its own ways quite different. Okay, because we've got this idea of a function being specifically named, and we've got more curly brackets. So I hope that's all okay. Apologies again for my forgetting to swing the actual trident. That would have helped. I actually made that mistake, that exact same mistake, when I was testing this session the other day. I couldn't figure out why the code wasn't running, and then I realised it's because I hadn't swung the trident. So, you know, yeah, it's best not to question that. So, next thing that we're going to do, which we'll start off with in a second, is I'm going to give you a bit of a demo on constructing a building, essentially. Okay, now this is going to take us through into the, I guess, the challenge in a way that we're going to have set for you today. But what we're going to do is I'm going to give you a bit of a demo. I can see that the GIFs are still coming through. The usual, they do make me laugh. So what we're going to do is we're going to go through. I'm going to give a bit of a demo. Sorry, I'm going to give a bit of a demo on how we can program the agent to construct a basic 4-walled room, okay? And then what I would like you to then do afterwards is essentially construct a building of your choice. So it can be your house, it can be your, I don't know, maybe your bedroom, it could be a castle, it could be you know, whatever you would like to build, you can build using the agent and programming that agent in JavaScript. Now, if you want to follow along and do this, you can do. Okay, that's absolutely fine. But if you don't want to follow along and you just want to watch for now, that's also fine. Okay, you'll have plenty of time afterwards to work your way through it. Okay, so I'm going to launch another new project. I'll just call this one JavaScript 3. But you can call it, well, of course, whatever you like. We'll flick over to JavaScript, and I'll just delete all of the default code that comes with it. So, I'm going to go and stand down here. And what we're going to do is we're going to specify that when the chat command, a certain chat command is run, we would like our agent to start doing things. Okay, so I know I deleted the bit of code that was just there, which is exactly what I'm about to type out now, but we're just going to type it in again. So again, what we're doing here is we're building up a function, and that function is, of course, something that we can reuse multiple times. So it's important that we give it a meaningful name so that we can remember exactly what it's there for. So that way, if we need to use it again, we know what function to call. So I'm just going to call it room. And the reason I'm going to call it room is because it's just going to be building up a simple 4-walled bedroom, okay, or a 4-walled room. It's not going to be a very interesting bedroom, so we'll just call it a room. So again, you can see that we've got player.onChat, which is essentially saying, when we enter the keyword room into the chat command, it's going to run this function. Again, you can see the open and close brackets there, and then we've also got this opened curly bracket, which is of course signifying the start of the function. And then of course we're going to be on line 2 indented by 1 tab space, so that we're saying now that all of this is part of the function. Okay, so of course what we want to do is we want to have our agent moving around. Now the choice is yours as to where you position your agent. Okay, you can have him teleport to the player, you can just leave him where he is if you want to. So of course my agent has spawned in there, so you can have him spawn in somewhere else, but I'm just going to leave him there for now. And so it's up to you, but if you do want to change the position of your agent, you can do that by going into the agent menu, and then of course you can return the agent to a position in the world coordinates, so agent.getPosition. You can specify what way he's facing, or you can teleport him directly to the player by using agent.teleport to player, open bracket, close bracket. Okay, but I'm just going to leave him where he is. So just to give you an example of how to program the agent to actually move, what I'll do is I'm going to say agent.move, and you can see that it's by default given me forward and 1 space. So the agent is going to move forward 1 space. Okay, nice and simple. But of course we also need the agent to have something to have in his inventory so that he can actually build the house. Okay, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to say agent.setItem. So agent.set item, and you can see that it's given me this grass 1,1. Now of course, to start off with, we don't want to be building the house out of grass, so I'm just going to change it to stone. Okay, but again the choice is whatever you want to include, that's fine. And you're probably wondering, what's this 1,1? Well, of course that is us saying how many of that item we want to include and in what slot within the agent's inventory we want to put it in. So I'm going to say the maximum, which is of course 64, and I want that in slot 1. So if I flick back over to block-based programming now, you can see something that's quite familiar to what we're used to. So on chat command room, agent move forward by 1, agent set blocker item stone, count 64 in slot 1. Okay, and of course we're used to that, and that's represented in JavaScript with this bit of code. Okay. Hopefully everybody's with me so far. Remember, if there are any questions, post them in the chat. So, one thing that I like to do with the agent, or one thing that I find easier to do when the agent is building something, is have him place the objects down rather than have objects, because our agent's going to be moving forwards. So of course, as we know, if we try and place something forwards, it's just going to soon as we place that first thing in front of us, the agent's just going to get stuck. So I like to have the agent move up one block and then place everything down. So we're going to say on the next line, we're going to say agent.move, but instead of forward one, we're going to change that to being up one. Okay. So agent's going to move up one. And now we can start telling the agent to actually assemble or build our little property. Okay. Our little room. So I'm going to be using some nested for loops. Now, like when we were building things with the repeat blocks, we of course said that we needed to have a room that was 4 walls and had was say 10 blocks on each side. That it was say that it was had 4 sides that were 10 blocks each, and that it was 5 blocks high. So we nested our repeat blocks to do that. So we had a block inside of a block inside of a block, so that way the agent would put a layer of 10 blocks, then he would turn, do it again, turn, do it again, and turn, do it again, so that we had 4 sides. And then we said how high we wanted the agent to go by saying we wanted the whole bit of code to repeat X amount of times. So we're going to do that now, but using for loops, and we're going to have 3 nested for loops. Now this is going to be quite confusing in terms of the number of brackets and things like that. So if you get confused, just tell me and I'll slow it down. But I think hopefully we should be okay. So new line, okay. Our agent has moved up, so now we need him to start actually assembling those walls. So I'm going to say for again, and we're going to initialize a new variable. So I'm going to use 3 variables here, okay? So of course we need 1 to represent the height of the building, 1 to represent the how long each wall is, and 1 to represent how many walls there are. Now I'm going to use X, Y, and Z, but of course if you wanted to, you could use names that represent each one. So you could say have you could maybe call one length, you could call one height, and you could call one sides, for an example. But just to keep the code a little bit shorter, I'm just going to call mine X, Y, and Z. So we're going to start off with X, let X, and of course I'm going to start it off at 0, semicolon, and I'm going to, this first block is of course going to represent how high my building is going to be. So I would like my building to be, in this case, 5 blocks high. So I'm going to say, well, start my value of X off at 0, and I'm going to say, while X is less than 5 blocks, less than 5, sorry, which of course means it's going to be 5 blocks high. And then with every iteration of the loop, we're saying X++. Okay, and then I of course need to put a curly bracket at the end of that, which is signifying that this is now everything that's inside of my for loop. So this is saying that we're having our building 5 blocks high, but we also need to say how many walls, how many sides our in terms of walls our building is going to have. So my building is going to have 4 sides. It's just going to be a simple square. Okay. So we need to represent that again using for loop. So I'm going to say for let, but in this time I'm going to say y equals 0. My building is going to have 4 sides, so I'm going to say x, that's meant to be y is less than 4 y++. Okay, so again now we are within this specific for loop, so we need to put another curly bracket. So you can see that we've got quite a few curly brackets here now, so try your best to keep track of where each curly bracket is going. Okay, and then of course we need a for loop that states how long each side of the building needs to be. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to say that it's going to be 10 sides, 10 blocks long. Okay, So another for loop, for, just going to put a space there actually, just to keep things consistent. There we go. So in this case, I'm going to say that my variable is called z. Okay, it's going to be 10 sides, so we're going to say, well, z is less than 10, z plus plus. And again, another curly bracket at the end there to say what's inside of this particular for loop. So inside of this for loop, what we want the agent to do is place our blocks down. Okay, our 10 blocks to signify one straight run of blocks. So we're going to say agent dot place down, and then open bracket down. So we're now telling the agent that we're placing some objects down, and every time the agent places an object down, the agent then needs to move forward one space. Okay, so nice and simple. I'll highlight this for loop just so that we can get started, just so that we know where we're up to. So this particular for loop is representing the length of each side of the building, and we're saying that in this case the building is going to be 10 blocks per side, and every time the agent places a block down, it's then going to be move forward one block until we get to 10 blocks. Now once we've reached the 10 blocks, we need the agent to turn so that we can produce the next side. So of course that needs to be part of our second for loop, because of course there are 4 sides to each building. So to do that, you can go underneath the closing bracket for the third for loop, and you can say agent.turn. So we can say agent.turn, and we're going to say, you can say turn direction left, or you can just put, to keep it simpler, you can just say turn underscore, you could just say turn right or turn left, okay, whichever you prefer. So turn underscore right. Oh, sorry, wrong way round. It's right underscore turn, sorry. So right underscore turn. So this bit of code, you'll notice, isn't in line with this bit of code, and the reason being is because this bit of code is with this for loop, and this bit of code is with this for loop. Okay, so the reason that that is indented further is because that is part of that for loop, and this is part of this for loop. Okay, so I know that looks a little bit confusing, so if you are unsure, just tell me. So we've got our, so far what we're saying is we want our building to be 5 blocks high, we want there to be 4 sides, and we want each side to be 10 blocks long. But so far our agent isn't currently moving up any blocks. Okay, so underneath the closing curly bracket for the second for loop, we need to say that after both of those for loops have run, we want our agent to move. So we can say agent.move, and we want our agent to move. We don't want our agent to move forward, but we'd like our agent to move up by 1 space. Okay, and that, as you can see, isn't in line with this bit of code, because this bit of code is tied to this for loop. So we have lots and lots and lots of brackets there. Okay, but I'll leave that on the screen for a second, and I'll zoom in a tad, and then we'll go through that all together now, so that we can once again, so that we can see how that works. I know there's quite a few lines of code there, and it's quite a lot to take in, especially for those of you who are new to JavaScript. So if you've been following along so far, really well done. But remember, we are here to help, so don't be afraid to ask us any questions if you are feeling a bit stuck on a particular point. Okay, there's a lot to take in. So we've got player.onChat room function, open bracket, close bracket, and then curly bracket. So we're saying that in the chat command, when we type room, we're going to be running this particular function. Okay. As soon as that function is run, everything that's within these curly brackets is going to run. Okay. These two curly brackets on line 1 and 15 signify everything that's between them is what's part of that function. So the first thing that's going to happen is our agent's going to move forward by 1, and then we're going to set 64 stone blocks into slot number 1, okay, of the agent's inventory. And then instantly after that, the agent's going to move up by 1 space, okay? So that's where we're up to so far. Then we have our 3 for loops. Okay, so we've got our 3 for loops. The first for loop is representing how high our building is going to be, which is why the 2 other for loops are a part of the first for loop, because what it's saying is that we need all of this to happen 5 times. Okay, all of this needs to happen 5 times. We then have our second for loop, which is saying how many walls the building is going to have. So in this case, of course, it's going to be 4 sides. So there'll be 4 sides to the room. And of course, we also need to say how long each side needs to be, which is why this for loop is enclosed inside of this for loop, because we need 4 10-block long walls. Okay. So the agent is going to place a block down, then he's going to move forward by 1 space, and as soon as he's reached those 10 blocks, this loop then finishes, and this loop then runs. So we're turning right, and then this loop is running again. And this loop will run a total of 4 times, because there are 4 sides to the building. But this whole bit of code will run 5 times so that the building is 5 blocks high, because the main outer loop is set to run 5 times so that the building can be 5 blocks high. So this will run 10 times to signify 10 blocks, this will run 4 times for 4 sides, and this will run 5 times so it can be 5 blocks high. I hope that all made sense. If we have before running it, if we have a quick look at the block-based program, you can see that it looks pretty much exactly the same to what we've been doing over what we were doing before Summer of STEM. Okay, we've got 5 blocks. We're repeating everything 5 times, but we only want the agent to turn right 4 times, so that we've got 10 blocks per wall, turning right, and then after he's turned right 4 times, he's moving up 1, and then we're repeating all of that code again until it's built the wall 5 blocks high. So Python looks very similar, slightly less code in Python, but again we've still got our nested for loops. Okay, and you can see that we've got dev to represent define for the name of our function. So here we are. Now, if you are flicking backwards and forwards between languages, bear in mind that sometimes Code Builder likes to change your variable names to index because you're using a for loop. So you can, if you want to, just change those back to being what they were before. So I had X, Y, and of course I had Z. Oh no, don't want that. There we go. Not quite sure why it does that. Okay, so remember accessing the chat command is done by pressing T on the keyboard. We're going to run our code, and off he goes. So you can see that he's off. He's built his 4 walls. He's gone up one, and then he's continuing to build those the 4 walls, which is 5 blocks high. So, this is the most uninteresting sort of bedroom or room ever. So, what I would like you all to do now is I'd like you all to spend a little bit of time with your agent, okay? And what I'd like you to do is program the agent using JavaScript or Python, okay? But try not to use block-based. You can go back to the block-based if you want to have a look at, to remind yourselves on how something works. But what I would like you all to spend some time doing now is go through that block-based JavaScript or Python program, okay? Preferably JavaScript, since that's what we're going to hopefully be looking at over the next few weeks. And I'd like you to program your agent to build up a building of your choice, okay? It doesn't have to be, just a basic room like I've got here, but I'd like you to try and build any type of building that you'd like using JavaScript. And what I'd like you to also do, if you can, is post a screenshot of that building, and hopefully the code as well, if you can, into the Discord chat, so that we can take a look at what you've been working on, okay? I hope that all makes sense, and I hope you have a good time trying to do this. Andy and I, of course, are around if you need any help. Okay, so if you need any help, Andy and I are here to lend you all a hand. And then what I'll do in a second is I'll go through essentially a plan for what we're going to be doing in the coming weeks as well. And I will also decorate this room a little bit so that it looks a bit more interesting next to my very big aquarium. So, has anybody got any questions so far? Has anybody got anything they'd like to ask about JavaScript or anything that they might be unsure of in JavaScript? I'll pop that code back on the screen while I'm talking, just so that you can take a look at it. Okay. Remember as well that the menus along the left of the screen also have some tips on ways in which you can do things. Okay. In case you get stuck. So, hopefully that's all clear, okay, and it all makes sense. Again, flick back and forth between JavaScript and block-based if you do need to remind yourselves on how to do something. But like I said, try your best to program in JavaScript for this, just so that we can try and get ourselves a bit more familiar with it. I'm still learning JavaScript as well, by the way. So I've only done a little bit of JavaScript myself, and I was using it for I was building a website, and I was using JavaScript to program an image gallery and image carousel into a website. So I was using some JavaScript along with, of course, HTML and CSS, which are the core kind of fundamentals, as a lot of you know, when the 3 kind of main languages, I guess, that you need when you're building a website: HTML, CSS, and JavaScript. And they all kind of amalgamate together to build up a really kind of nice sort of website. So, haven't had any questions come through, so I think everybody seems to be okay. I'll let everybody work on that for a little while. I'll leave my code up on the screen, and what I'll do is I'll go through, just while everybody's getting started on that, I'll go through the plan for the next few weeks while we have a chance. So, as I mentioned last week, our current plan is to continue to run the Coding Club weekly every Wednesday. Okay. Currently, the timings still stand at, of course, between 4 and 6, but if there are any changes to that, we will let you know. We'll be kind of having a bit of a chat about things this week and things like that. So if there are any, if there is anything, any changes to the schedule, we will let you know. The focus will be looking at JavaScript mainly over the coming weeks, and we will see where that takes us then. So we might end up then progressing into doing something else, like using our knowledge on JavaScript as a means of kind of focusing on progressing into other languages or progressing into other elements of design and things like that. But we'll see kind of how far we get with JavaScript and things like that. So that's the plan for the next few weeks. I know a lot of you are, of course, back in school and things now, so or will be back in school this week. So I hope that you have had a good first few days back if you are back at school now. Or good luck on your first day back if you are heading back in tomorrow. I'm sure it'll be good fun. I'm very excited to get started back at university again in a couple of weeks. So I hope that you all have a nice sort of first week back at school. But that's the plan for the next few weeks. So we will still be doing the Coding Club. We will still be running things. But if there are any changes to the schedule, then we will tell you. But the plan is to have JavaScript as our main focus, and we'll be running the sessions every Wednesday. So that's the plan. So get started on the if you get started on today's challenge, I'm going to start decorating that little room. And if you do need a hand with anything, let me or Andy know in the Discord. That's okay, Alex. Thank you for joining in today. I hope you enjoyed the session. Yeah, no worries. That's all good. Remember, they are up everything's up on YouTube. Yeah, so carry on. The last part of this session, anyway, Alex, is just going to be us finishing off the challenge. So you shouldn't miss too much. But thank you for joining in, and have a good week. Okay. So for those of you that are still on, I'm going to just be decorating this room now, and then if anybody does have any questions, just let Andy and I know, and we will lend you a hand. Remember, this is could also be programmed, what I'm doing now, using the agent, if you wanted to, and you could try doing that in JavaScript or Python, or if you want to keep developing your block-based programming, then go for it as well. Any type of programming is good. And I'm sure what a lot of you have probably already noticed as well are the similarities between the programming languages. So we've already, probably a lot of you have noticed that there's some similarities between us having, the use of loops, the use of variables, the use of if statements. Okay, we didn't use any if statements today, but the use of if statements. You can see them all the way through each one of the programming languages, you can see that they're used even in block-based. There are still language. There are still. There are still the same concepts are used in all of the languages. Okay. So the only really thing, so since a lot of you already, of course, know the concepts very well now, the only thing that a lot of you will really need to remember now is the way in which they are written in each language, which is very good. And they're only slightly different as well in each one, so not a huge, you won't have too much to learn really, which is very good. Seems I've put my door in the wrong place. There we go. Let's get some stone back. If anybody is watching on YouTube, does anybody have any questions? If you are watching this back, by the way, remember that we do monitor the Discord, so if anybody does have questions, if you're watching this back on YouTube, just pop them in Discord and we will we'll help you out as best we can during the week. Oops. Oh no. There we go. There we go. So we'll decorate this room a little bit. And then once we've done that, we'll go back to taking a look at some bits of code. So again, this is something, if you wanted to program the agent to do, you could certainly give that a try. Hopefully everything is coming along nicely for those of you who are watching. If you are watching this back, post pictures. I'd love to see some pictures during the week in Discord of anything that you've been working on. And also your scripts as well, your JavaScript scripts, or your Python scripts, or if you want to, your block-based scripts. Feel free to definitely post them in the Discord. We all really love taking a look at the work that you've been doing and things. So if you want to post those in, go for it, 100%. I'd love to see what you've been working on. Go. So I've got a bit of a house here now, which is pretty cool. So hopefully everybody is coming along okay with the challenge today. Just pop the code back on the screen for a second. Okay. So, hopefully that is all, everybody's coming along okay with that. What I'll quickly do is just do another quick run through of the JavaScript code that's on the screen now, just to kind of remind ourselves of what it's doing and the idea of all the nested loops and things like that. So we are saying in the when we run our function, okay, or in this case our script, by typing in room into the chat command, what we will then do is we will say, right, the agent is going to take one step forward. We're going to be placing 64 blocks of stone into the first slot of his inventory, and then the agent is going to move up by one space, okay, to make it easier to build things. And that is all part of the function that begins after this curly bracket. After this round bracket, okay? All of this is part of that. But the reason, of course, that we are indented by one tab space is because we are part of this same function. So then we, of course, have our for loops. So these are nested, okay? So we have inner and outer for loops, and the reason that we have those is so that way we can still run different bits of code on repeat, so that we can run, as well as running a loop so many times, we can rerun that loop so many times. So that's why we're running the agent, sort of the fun example, we're saying agent place down. So we are building 4 sides to the building, and we of course want that for loop to run a total of 5 times so that the building is 5 blocks high. So by nesting our loops, we can, as well as having certain bits of code run so many times, we can also have we can also rerun the loops themselves. In a way, we can kind of reset the conditions. So the first loop is representing our building's height, and everything that's within these 2 curly brackets is what's part of that for loop. The second loop is representing the building's how many sides the building has, and again everything that's part of that loop is between these 2 curly brackets. And then the third loop is representing how long each side of the building is, and everything that's part of that loop is being represented by those 2 curly brackets. Okay. The for loop's condition is specified between the 2 rounded brackets that come after the word for. The first bit of code allows us to initialize our variable, which is going to act as our counter, which will keep track of the number of times our loop is run. The second part of the things between the rounded brackets is the loop's condition, which specifies exactly how many times the loop will run. And the final part is the section that allows us to increment the value of our variable so that it acts as a counter. And once the counter has reached its limit, which is of course in this case any value, once it reaches 5, okay, as soon as it gets to 5, this condition is no longer true, so it breaks out of the loop and moves on to the next part. Okay, so those rules apply for every single one of the for loops, and if we flick over to Python, very similar principle is applied, except instead of writing out and declaring a variable that way, we are saying for x in range 5. And what that does is it's saying that the value of x will be incremented once every time the loop is run until it reaches the value of 5, and then it will break out of the loop. So back to JavaScript. We're going to be building up our building. It's going to have the agent place 10 blocks down in a row, then turn right, do that again and again and again until all 4 sides have been met. And once it's built 4 sides, it's then going to move up by 1. This loop's x, the value of x then gets increased by 1, and then we start running these 2 loops again. So essentially it resets the value of these 2 variables when this loop starts up again. Once that's all done, we then have to make sure that, of course, everything is indented appropriately, that all of the curly brackets are in the correct place. And once all that's all done, we can then seal off the entire function with curly brackets so that all of that is tied between these 2 curly brackets. And then we need to say that we've reached the end of the function with that rounded bracket. Okay? And then, of course, when we run that, let's just get back to the building. It will, of course, produce a square building. Of course, there's no roof, but it will produce this square building, which you can then decorate accordingly. So, I hope that that's been a nice little introduction to JavaScript. What we might start looking at next week is using a different platform for using JavaScript. So we will still do JavaScript, but it might not necessarily be in Minecraft. We were using Minecraft today purely as a way of introducing the idea of JavaScript rather than actually, running it. Okay. I'm not quite sure yet what we will be doing, but I will let you all know, of course, once I have an idea of what activity we're going to do. I will, of course, let you all know in the Discord prior to us doing it. We will be, definitely carrying on with JavaScript. We will try and build and maybe up some more beginners programs and things like that, solidifying our knowledge on different ways to program in JavaScript and the different things that we can do with it. And we can do that, and getting used to this idea of brackets and variables and programming in JavaScript away from Minecraft. And then, of course, hopefully, if you can program JavaScript outside of Minecraft, if you wanted to program the agent in Minecraft itself, you could do that using the knowledge that you've gained from what we did outside of JavaScript, outside of Minecraft. So if anybody does have any other questions, please pop them in the Discord now. Or, of course, join the voice channel. Again, just to reiterate, if people are watching this back on YouTube, feel free to pop a question in the Discord anytime during the week, and we'll get back to you as soon as we can. As you know, I monitor the Discord quite often anyway, so I'll get back to you as soon as I can. However, if nobody else has any other questions, I think we'll wrap it up a little bit earlier today. We'll finish it up there, just about 15 minutes earlier. Remember to keep posting things post pictures of your work in Discord throughout the week if you get a chance to work on anything. I know with a lot of you being back at school now, it might be harder to work on things. But if you do get a chance in a bit of free time after finishing your homework and things, then feel free to post some pictures and we'll take a look at them. And but I know they're going to be great anyway. So, but thank you everybody for joining in today. I'll end the stream now, and then I'll speak to you all next week. And Andy, could I just chat to you quickly in Techno Team as well, please? That would be lovely.
Not a problem.
Thank you. All right, thanks everybody. I will speak to you all next week.